My boyfriend, Tony, dragged me to the campus blood drive run by the Student Volunteer Coalition. I was chronically anemic, nowhere near the safety threshold to donate, but when I tried to pull back, he just scoffed. Why did you even join the SVC if you don't have a bone of civic duty in your body, Naomi? He coaxed and guilted me onto that bloodmobile. But I didn't know then, not until I was already lying on a sterile hospital bed, that my blood wasn't destined for some anonymous bank. It was being sent directly to a private lab to be matched with the bone marrow of our campus darling, Susanna Hastings. Tony forged my signature, shoved me into the extraction room, and watched as they took what wasn't theirs. In the end, I got a severe infection, went into septic shock, and died alone in the ICU. When I opened my eyes again, the harsh fluorescent lights of an observation ward blind me. A nurse walks in, clipboard in hand. Naomi Miller? Get ready. We're heading up to hematology for your final matching confirmation. My boyfriend, Tony Henderson, is sitting by the bedside, his hand reaching out to stroke my hair with that practiced sickening tenderness. Don't worry, babe. It's just a formality. I stare up at him, my heart hammering against my ribs, and dial 911. The second the line connects, Tony's gentle smile freezes. I hold his gaze, my voice steady and clear as I speak to the dispatcher. Hello. My name is Naomi Miller. I'm a freshman at Coastal State University. I have reason to believe that someone used a campus blood drive to illegally harvest my blood sample for a bone marrow match without my consent. Now they are trying to force me into further testing. I am chronically anemic. I do not consent to any matching, harvesting, or donation. Please send officers. I'm in the observation wing of the hematology department at Valley Memorial Hospital. Tony snaps out of his trance, lunging forward. Naomi, have you lost your mind? He reaches out, clawing at my phone. I don't shrink back. I scream at the top of my lungs. Nurse! He's trying to take my phone. Someone call security. The entire hallway goes dead silent. Two nurses poke their heads into the room, and a patient's relative in the next bay stands up to get a better look. Tony's hand freezes midair, his face twisting through a dozen ugly shades of panic before he quickly plasters on his signature look of gentle, long-suffering patience. She's just stressed, he says, looking at the onlookers with a helpless shrug. It's a misunderstanding. We're classmates, well, we're dating. I just brought her in for a routine volunteer checkup. I let out a cold laugh. A volunteer checkup that requires HLA high-resolution typing? The nurse blinks, looking confused. Tony's eyes darken. Naomi, stop throwing around medical jargon you don't understand. I reach under my pillow and pull out the clipboard clipped to the foot of my bed. In my past life, I hadn't even glanced at it before he stuffed it into my bag. This time, I unfold it, holding it up for everyone to see. Under the requested procedures column, the words scream in black ink. HLA recipient cross-match, donor confirmation, complete blood count. I point my finger directly at the word recipient. Who is the recipient, Tony? Tony squeezes his eyes shut, exhaling slowly as if trying to tolerate an unreasonable child. Susanna's condition is critical, Naomi. You're just doing a confirmation. Nobody is making you donate right this second. Is saving a life really worth calling the cops? When did I consent to being screened in the first place? I ask him. He doesn't answer. When did I sign the informed consent form for bone marrow donation? Still silence. And why does the system show my anemia profile as perfectly normal? Tony's expression turns utterly venomous. Sensing the shift in the room, the nurse immediately turns on her heel to fetch the charge nurse. I clutch my phone, my voice unwavering. I want my medical records, blood draw logs, security footage, and signature files flagged and sealed immediately, I announce to the room. No one is taking me anywhere without my explicit, in-person consent. Tony steps closer, dropping his voice to a menacing whisper. Naomi, don't blow this out of proportion. Susanna Hastings is lying in a ward upstairs, fighting for her life. I look up at him. And, because she wants to live, I'm obligated to hand over my blood, my marrow, my actual life? His brow furrows in genuine frustration. How can you be so dramatic? No one is trying to kill you. In my last life, I believed him. And it cost me my life. I don't have the energy to appeal to his conscience anymore. Conscience is a luxury Tony traded away a long time ago to pave his career path. 10 minutes later, hospital security arrives. 20 minutes after that, Officer Darren from the local precinct walks in with his partner. Tony is finally sweating. But his first instinct isn't to explain, it's to blame me. Officer, she's emotionally unstable, Tony says, turning to Officer Darren. We were just registering for a charity match. She suddenly panicked and started making wild accusations against the hospital. Officer Darren looks at me. Are you the caller? I nod, unlocking my phone and pulling up the voice recorder app. I play it. From the moment the nurse walked in saying, final matching confirmation, to Tony whispering, Susanna is fighting for her life. Every single syllable is laid bare. Tony's lips drain of color. I bring up my medical history, my freshman physical, and the photo I took of the bloodmobile schedule. I don't meet the medical criteria for blood donation. But during the drive, the Student Volunteer Coalition still drew an extra vial of my blood, claiming it was for a volunteer health database. I never signed a registry. I have no idea how my sample ended up in a matching lab. Officer Darren's face hardens. He asks the staff to call the department head. Tony tries to speak, but I cut him off. Officer, I want a forensic handwriting analysis on any consent form they claim to have. If my signature is on there, it's forged. Before the words can settle, a weak, trembling voice drifts in from the open doorway. Naomi, why are you doing this to Tony? I turn my head. Susanna Hastings is sitting in a wheelchair, draped in an oversized hospital gown. Her face is so pale it's almost translucent, her eyes brimming with tears. I just want to live. The moment Susanna appears, the atmosphere in the hallway shifts. She's the golden girl of Coastal State, the face of our university's promotional videos, the straight-A student, the star of every gala. Since her diagnosis, the university's social media pages have posted endless pleas for her. Save our golden girl. Thousands of dollars have poured into her GoFundMe. Even I had donated $50 in my past life, genuinely wishing for her recovery. That was before she used my body to buy herself a second chance. Susanna grips the armrests of her wheelchair, tears spilling over her lashes. Naomi, I know you're scared, but it's just a test. No one is forcing you to donate right now. Tony immediately drops to his knees beside her, adjusting the blanket over her legs. It's a scene I know all too well. The frail beauty, the devoted boyfriend, and me, the cold-hearted, selfish villain refusing to help. That was exactly how they painted me in my past life, turning the world against me. I don't even look at Susanna. I keep my eyes on Officer Darren. I refuse to discuss my medical information in front of people who have nothing to do with my care. Susanna's sobbing hitches. Tony looks up, his eyes flashing with rage. She isn't an unrelated party. She's the recipient. I let out a soft laugh. So you admit it? His face pales. Officer Darren immediately steps in. You already knew the donor-recipient match? Who disclosed that information? Did the donor sign an authorization for this match? Tony opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. Susanna lowers her head, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know the procedures. I just heard from the doctor that there was hope. Just then, a middle-aged man in a white lab coat rushes down the hall. His badge reads, Dr. Barlow, Chief of Hematology. In my last life, he was the one who altered my hemoglobin levels in the system. He was the one who breezed into my room before the harvest and said, You're young and healthy, kid. A little bone marrow draw won't hurt. You'll bounce right back. Dr. Barlow frowns the second he steps inside. Why are the police here? This is a routine medical consultation. I look him dead in the eye. Dr. Barlow, when did I authorize your department to run an HLA test on my blood? He doesn't look at me, keeping his tone icy and professional. You registered with the SVC donor database. Screening is part of the standard protocol. Show me the registration, I say, holding out my hand. Show me my signature. He hesitates for a fraction of a second. The documents are filed in our system. Then pull them up. Right now. The hospital's chief administrator arrives shortly after. Officer Darren requests that all related physical charts, system logs, and signed authorizations be impounded. Dr. Barlow's expression sours. Officer, these are private medical files. We can't just hand them over. The patient is the one requesting her own records. Officer Darren replies calmly. She has every legal right to verify her own signature. While we wait for the physical archives to be pulled, a nurse begins to wheel Susanna back to her room. Suddenly, Susanna reaches out and snatches the hem of my shirt. Naomi, please. I'm running out of time, she whimpers, her hand trembling. I don't want to hurt you. I just need a little bit of hope. I look down at her pale fingers. She had held me just like this in my previous life. Right before I was wheeled into the harvest room, she lay on her gurney crying, I'll never forget what you did for me. And then I died. And she lived. I gently but firmly pry her fingers off my shirt. Your hope cannot be bought with my life. Her tears flow faster. Within minutes, my phone starts vibrating violently. The SVC group chat is blowing up. Did Naomi Miller seriously call the cops after matching with Susanna? Susanna is literally dying. Calling the police is so toxic. She was happy to log volunteer hours for her resume, but the second she actually has to give back, she plays dead? Anemia is literally so common. Stop using it as an excuse. Then someone posts a cropped screenshot of my university freshman physical. My name is fully visible. My low hemoglobin level is circled in red, captioned, She's not even that sick. Drama queen. I stare at the screen, my fingertips turning numb. The cyberbullying in my past life had been brutal, but seeing it play out again makes my stomach turn. They called me selfish. They said I was a parasite. They said Tony deserved so much better. And when I died, they simply said, well, her health was poor anyway. You can't blame anyone. This time, I don't type a single word of explanation. I screen record the chat. I take screenshots. I save the names, the timestamps, the member list, and the forward history. Then I call Dean Collins, the faculty advisor for the Student Volunteer Coalition. Dean Collins, my private medical records have just been leaked online by members of the coalition. Furthermore, I have reason to believe the campus blood drive was used to illegally harvest student blood samples. There is a long pause on the other end. Naomi, where are you right now? Valley Memorial Hospital. Stay put. I'm on my way. As soon as I hang up, Tony steps into the doorway. The tender boyfriend act is entirely gone. Naomi, do you really have to drag everyone down with you? I look at him. You're the ones who dragged me onto a harvest table first. His eyes turn cold and menacing. If Susanna misses her transplant window because of you, you'll regret this for the rest of your life. I hold his gaze. I've already regretted it for a lifetime. He doesn't understand what I mean, but I do. And the real battle hasn't even begun. By afternoon, the university forum is in a complete frenzy. The headlines are vile. Donor backs out last minute, calls cops. Susanna Hastings left to die? Freshman uses volunteer hours for resume, cowards out when actually needed. It's just a bone marrow donation. Does it ever actually kill anyone? The comment section is a toxic wasteland. Her boyfriend literally begged her. She's so cold-blooded. Susanna is the pride of our school. If she dies, how will this girl sleep at night? I'm anemic and I donate blood all the time. Stop whining. Can we expose her face? People like this shouldn't be allowed in our community. My roommate, Becca, sends me a text. She's usually timid, always trying to keep the peace. Naomi, maybe you should just talk to Tony? Donating bone marrow is a good thing. Involving the police is going to ruin your reputation. I stare at her message for a long time before replying. If someone stole your blood, tested it without your knowledge, and then forged your signature to force you into surgery, would you still think it's a good thing? Becca doesn't reply for several minutes. Finally, she writes back. But Susanna is just so sweet. It's so sad. I close the chat. People always confuse sympathy with entitlement. Being pitiful isn't a free pass, and it certainly doesn't give anyone the right to harvest my organs. By evening, Dean Collins arrives at the hospital. Her face grows grimmer with every document I show her. The university never approved any bone marrow screening programs for the blood drive, she says. Then who had access to the student roster and RID copies? I ask. Dean Collins hesitates. The club president, Tony Henderson. She immediately contacts the university's legal counsel. Meanwhile, Officer Darren and his team secure the registration logs from the bloodmobile, the blood sample transit logs, and the hospital's internal database history. Dr. Barlow keeps insisting it's all a misunderstanding. The student probably signed a stack of volunteer paperwork and forgot. Screening is a routine part of these drives. We haven't performed any invasive procedures. I listened to his excuses, feeling completely numb. This was exactly what they did last time. Step by step, they claimed it was just a formality, until I was trapped in the ICU, and even then they blamed my unfortunate, weak constitution. At 9 o'clock, the head nurse comes by to check on me. No one is authorized to transfer you or perform any tests without your physical, written consent. Don't worry. I nod. But I don't feel safe. In my past life, they took me in the middle of the night. Not through the front lobby, but through the back exit. The transport vehicle didn't even belong to the hospital. It was a private van belonging to some sketchy wellness center. Tony had told me then, Valley Memorial is too crowded. We're going to a partner clinic for a quick checkup. We'll be right back. I had been so blind, so trusting. By the time I realized something was wrong, they had confiscated my phone. Thinking of this, I open my location sharing and send it to Officer Darren and Dean Collins. Then I walk to the nurse's station. If anyone tries to transfer me, order a test, or check me out, please verify it with me directly. It only counts if I say yes on camera. The head nurse looks at me with a soft, sympathetic gaze. Understood, sweetie. By 10:30, the ward grows quiet. Tony has been missing all afternoon, but I know he won't let this go. Sure enough, at 11:07 p.m., my door creaks open. A man wearing a blue transport uniform walks in. His badge reads Blood Center Logistics Agent. He holds a clipboard. Naomi Miller? We have a transfer order for your follow-up screening. I stare at his face, and the blood in my veins turns to ice. It's him, the exact same transport driver from my past life. The one who had sneered at my tears and told me, "You're a lucky girl. You get to save a life and get paid for it." I lower my eyes, pretending to be frightened. Now, where's my boyfriend? The driver says, "He's waiting for you downstairs." Just as he says it, Tony steps into the room from behind him. He's wearing a crumpled white shirt, looking exhausted, like a good guy who's been driven to his wits' end by a difficult girlfriend. Naomi, please stop making a scene, Tony says softly. Let's just finish the confirmation test, and this will all be over. I shrink back into the mattress. I'm not going. He steps closer, lowering his voice. The Hastings family is going to compensate you. $50,000 plus an internship at their firm. You've been stressed about paying tuition, Naomi. This solves everything. I look at him, my heart turning to stone. So that was my price. And if I still say no? Tony's expression hardens, the gentle facade completely slipping. You already signed the consent form. He pulls a few sheets of paper from a folder. Naomi, don't make me make this ugly. I look at the signature at the bottom of the page. The messy, curved letters look remarkably like my handwriting. But they aren't mine. Let me see that, I say, reaching out. Thinking I've finally capitulated, Tony hands the papers over. The moment they touch my fingers, I slam my hand down on the emergency call button. Footsteps immediately start echoing down the hall. The transport driver's face pales, and he spins around to bolt. Tony lunges forward, grabbing my wrist in a vice grip. Naomi. But before he can pull me, the door is flung wide open. Let go of her, a cold voice barks. The door didn't just swing open. It slammed against the drywall with a violent crack that echoed down the sterile hallway. Standing in the frame was Officer Darren, flanked by 2 armed campus security officers and the hospital's nocturnal administrative supervisor, a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, whose eyes immediately locked onto Tony's. Fingers dug into my bruised wrist. Step away from the bed. Hands where I can see them. Now. Darren's voice wasn't a warning, it was a command backed by the unholstering of his sidearm. The blue uniformed transport driver didn't even hesitate. He dropped his aluminum clipboard and bolted toward the secondary fire exit at the end of the room. He didn't make it 2 paces. The taller security guard lunged, catching the driver by his collar and slamming him face first into the observation window. The glass rattled with a dull thump. Tony froze. His grip on my arm went slack, his fingers peeling away as if my skin had suddenly turned red hot. Officer, wait, this isn't what it looks like, Tony stammered, raising his palms. His face was slick with sweat, the neat part in his hair falling into disarray over his forehead. I was just checking on her. She's having an episode. She's my girlfriend. I am not his girlfriend, I said, my voice cutting through the panic with the precision of a scalpel. I held up my right hand, still clutching the forged consent documents Tony had foolishly handed me seconds before. And this is a fraudulent medical transfer order bearing a forged signature. Mrs. Gable stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. He scooped the dropped clipboard off the floor, adjusted her glasses, and skimmed the top page. Her face drained of what little color it had. This transport slip isn't issued by Valley Memorial, she said, her voice dropping into an icy, professional register. The authorization header belongs to the Street Point Jude Biologistics LLC, a private transport entity out of county. Who cleared this onto my floor? Tony's eyes darted toward the hallway, looking desperately for Dr. Barlow, but the corridor outside was dead quiet. Barlow had vanished the moment the police uniforms appeared. Put your hands behind your back, son, Darren said, stepping into the room and grabbing Tony's left shoulder. Wait, you can't arrest me, Tony yelled, writhing against Darren's grip. I'm a student leader. My uncle is on the county board of commissioners. Naomi, tell them you're doing this voluntarily. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I watched as the steel cuffs clicked around his wrists with 2 sharp, metallic snaps. In my last life, my wrists had been bruised by the leather restraints of an unlicensed extraction gurney while Tony stood in the doorway, whispering that I was doing something noble. Seeing those cuffs on him now didn't bring me joy. It brought me an absolute, chilling clarity. I want the transport vehicle in the basement bay impounded, I told Officer Darren, swinging my legs over the edge of the hospital bed. If you search that van, you'll find portable centrifuge units, high-dose sedatives, and restraint straps. They weren't taking me to a partner clinic for a blood draw. They were taking me to an off-grid surgical suite. The captured driver, pinned against the wall, let out a low curse. Tony stared at me, his eyes wide and unhinged, realizing for the first time that I wasn't just resisting, I knew the entire blueprint of their machine before they had even turned the gears. Who told you? Tony breathed, his voice cracking into a horrified whisper. How? Do you know about the van? I know everything, Tony, I replied, standing up on my own 2 feet. And every single person who signed their name to that manifest is going to prison with you. By 2 a.m., the 3rd floor of Valley Memorial had become a crime scene. 2 squad cars were parked diagonally across the ambulance bay, their red and blue strobe lights painting the brick facade of the hospital in rhythmic pulses. Down in the subbasement parking structure, state police investigators were already running forensic swabs across the interior of the white, unmarked Ford Transit van the driver had brought. Inside, just as I had told them, they found an unlisted mobile cooler containing anti-rejection primers, 3 vials of clinical-grade propofol, and an industrial centrifuge labeled Hastings Biomedical Foundation. Dean Collins sat beside me in the private consultation room of the hospital's legal wing. She had brought me a warm paper cup of black tea and her own wool coat to drape over my shoulders. The university's general counsel is on the phone with the district attorney right now, Dean Collins said, her hands trembling slightly as she tapped her tablet. Naomi, what we're finding in the Student Volunteer Coalition's server logs is horrifying. Tony didn't just access your file. Over the last 6 months, 34 female freshmen with rare blood profiles had their physical records flagged and mirrored to a private server. Susanna Hastings has a rare HLA-B*27 subtype, I said, taking a sip of the bitter tea. Her family spent 2 years looking for a donor on the national registry. When the waitlist proved too slow, they decided to cultivate their own private farm right here on campus. Dean Collins looked sick, and the SVC was their funnel. Tony got his tuition paid through a leadership grant funded by the Hastings Foundation, I added, pulling up the public tax filings of the charity on my phone. Information I had memorized during the agonizing months I spent bedridden. In my previous life, every time he organized a blood drive, the foundation wrote a $40,000 check to his personal student account under the guise of organizational stipends. He wasn't a volunteer. He was a headhunter. The door opened, and Detective Morales from the County Prosecutor's Special Investigations Unit walked in. He was a stocky man with bags under his eyes and a thick manila folder tucked under his arm. Miss Miller, Morales said, pulling out a chair opposite me. We just ran a preliminary scan on the signature on the bone marrow registry form they submitted to the state database. It's an automated digital overlay copied from your freshman athletic waiver. The timestamp on the digital forgery traces back to Tony Henderson's campus IP address at 4:15 p.m. yesterday. He opened the folder, revealing a series of printed transaction logs. Furthermore, we executed an emergency search warrant on Dr. Barlow's office 40 minutes ago. He was in the middle of shredding patient intake logs. We recovered his personal laptop. In his encrypted emails, we found a direct correspondence between him, Tony Henderson, and Arthur Hastings, Susanna's father. What did the emails say? Dean Collins asked, her voice tight. Morales read directly from the printout. Subject: Recipient H09 match protocol. Donor candidate Naomi Miller shows a 10/10 high-resolution match. Low socioeconomic background, out of state. Student: minimal local family presence. Risk of legal blowback low. Barlow: prepare the private surgical suite at the St. Jude facility. Henderson: ensure she is delivered without campus incident after the evening shift. The room went dead silent. Dean Collins covered her mouth with a shaking hand. I looked at the black text on the white paper. Low family presence. Risk of legal blowback low. That was how they had measured my life. A set of logistical parameters to be weighed against the life of a billionaire's daughter. Detective, I said, my voice devoid of tremor. Dr. Barlow has an offshore account in the Cayman Islands registered under the name Apex Clinical Research. If you subpoena his wire transfers from last Tuesday, you'll find a $200,000 deposit from Hastings Maritime Logistics. Morales stared at me, his pen hovering in midair. How could you possibly know the name of an offshore shell company? I looked him dead in the eye, because when I was dying in the ICU, Dr. Barlow stood outside my door on his cell phone, bragging to his broker that the Apex transfer had cleared. Morales didn't ask how I could have heard that before the surgery had even taken place. He simply closed the folder, picked up his radio, and spoke to his team. Get a federal financial freeze on Apex Clinical Research immediately, and dispatch 2 units to the Hastings estate in North Harbor. We have probable cause for human trafficking and criminal conspiracy. While the police were securing the warrants, the internet was doing what it always did, consuming lies and spitting out venom. By 6 a.m., the campus forum had completely devolved into a digital witch hunt. Susanna Hastings had posted an update to her Instagram account from her hospital bed. The photo was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, a black and white picture of her fragile, 4-tapped hand resting on a white sheet, captioned, I was told there was a light at the end of the tunnel today. A match had been found. But sometimes people change their minds, and hope is taken away just as quickly as it comes. I don't blame anyone. Please don't be angry at those who choose not to help. Life is precious, even if mine is running out. Broken heart. Hashtag save Susanna, hashtag bone marrow awareness, hashtag CSU strong. The post had garnered 40,000 likes and 6,000 comments in 3 hours. The top comments were vicious. At CSU_Brody. Naomi Miller literally called the cops because she didn't want to get a needle prick. Selfish bitch. At GreekLife_Daily. She took SVC volunteer hours to boost her med school apps, then watched our campus president get arrested trying to save Susanna. Expel her. At Anonymous_CSU. Her dorm is in Oak Hall, room 304. Someone needs to throw her stuff out the window. My roommate Becca had already sent me 8 frantic texts. Naomi, people are outside our door shouting. They're sticking sticky notes on our door calling you a murderer. Where are you? Why aren't you explaining this? I sat in the passenger seat of Dean Collins's car as we drove onto the morning campus. The quad was already bustling with students holding a spontaneous vigil for Susanna. Banners painted in purple and gold read, "Donate for Susanna" and "Where is your humanity?" Dean Collins looked at the crowd through the windshield, her jaw clenched. "I'm calling campus security to disperse them. This is an incitement to harass." "No," I said, holding up my phone. "Let them gather. Let them stream it." "Naomi, they will tear you apart. They will only tear apart the version of me they invented," I replied, opening my laptop. "It's time to show them the real monster." I didn't post an emotional rant. I didn't write an apology. Using my administrative access as an SVC member, which Tony had forgotten to revoke, I uploaded a single uncompressed zip file to the university's main open access academic server and pinned the mirror link to the top of the campus forum, the local subreddit, and the state news tip line. The file was titled, "The Cost of a Life, the Complete Hastings Barlow Henderson Dossier." Inside was 1. The raw audio recording of Tony attempting to drag me out of the observation room with the private transport driver. 2. The forensic handwriting report proving my signature on the bone marrow registry was an automated forgery. 3. The leaked internal emails between Arthur Hastings and Dr. Barlow regarding the cultivation of vulnerable female students. 4. The bank statement showing Tony Henderson receiving $40,000 deposits, corresponding to every campus blood drive held over the last 18 months. 5. The photograph of the unmarked transit van containing propofol and physical restraints seized in the hospital basement. I hit publish. Within 60 seconds, the campus forum server crashed under the weight of 15,000 concurrent downloads. 10 minutes later, I walked onto the quad. The morning sun was bright, cutting through the autumn chill, illuminating the hundreds of students holding candles and purple ribbons outside the administration building. When someone in the front row spotted me, the chanting stopped instantly. "There she is," a guy in a varsity jacket shouted, pointing a finger at me. "The girl who called the cops on Tony." A low, angry rumble rolled through the crowd. Dozens of smartphones were immediately hoisted into the air, cameras pointed at my face. A girl with tears in her eyes pushed her way toward me, holding a sign that read compassion over cowardice. "How do you sleep at night?" she screamed at me, her voice shaking with righteous fury. "Susanna has 3 weeks to live, and you're treating her like a criminal." I stopped in the center of the brick plaza, right beneath the shadow of the campus bell tower. I didn't shrink back. I didn't lower my head. "Check your phones," I said. My voice wasn't a shout, but the sheer icy stillness in my posture made the people closest to me pause. "What?" the girl with the sign spat. "You think you can change the subject? Check the campus forum," I repeated, pointing toward the large digital bulletin board mounted on the student union wall. "Or check Twitter. Or the State Tribune. It just went live." A few students in the front row looked down at their screens. At first, there was only the soft clicking of fingers on glass. Then the silence began to spread like a drop of ink in clean water. A junior standing near the fountain gasped, "Wait, is this real?" "Play the audio," someone shouted. A student with a portable Bluetooth speaker linked his phone and hit play. Tony Henderson's voice, the same charismatic, polished voice that had given the freshman orientation welcome speech, boomed across the quad. "The Hastings family is going to compensate you. $50,000 plus an internship at their firm. You've been stressed about paying tuition, Naomi. This solves everything. You already signed the consent form. Naomi, don't make this ugly." Then came the sound of my voice screaming for security, followed by the sickening thud of the transport driver hitting the glass and Officer Darren shouting for hands on the wall. The crowd of 400 students stood utterly paralyzed. The girl holding the compassion over cowardice sign slowly lowered her arms, her face draining of color. Tony took money for this," she whispered to her friend. "Look at the emails," another student called out, his voice trembling with disgust. "Look at the attachment from Arthur Hastings. Candidate shows low. Family presence. Risk of legal blowback low. They were screening all of us. He flagged 34 girls. A sophomore cried, reading from her tablet. My name is on this list. I donated blood at the homecoming drive in October. My HLA typing is in this private database. Panic erupted across the plaza, but this time, it wasn't directed at me. Dozens of female students were frantically scrolling through the leaked database, finding their own student ID numbers, their home addresses, and their blood profiles categorized under backup donor pools. The vigil for Susanna disintegrated in less than 2 minutes. Signs were dropped onto the brick pavers and trampled underfoot. The crowd that had arrived to lynch me turned as one cohesive, furious tide toward the administration building, demanding the immediate dissolution of the student volunteer coalition and the arrest of the entire executive board. I stood alone in the center of the clearing, the wind blowing my hair across my face. Across the quad, standing at the edge of the tree line, was a black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. The rear window rolled down 2 inches. Arthur Hastings sat in the leather interior, his silver hair immaculate, his face carved from cold granite. He looked at me across the sea of enraged students, his eyes narrowing with the predatory realization that his daughter's private supply chain had just been pulverized into dust. I met his gaze, raised my right hand, and gave him a single, deliberate wave. The Escalade's window rolled up, and the heavy SUV sped away toward the highway. At 2 p.m., the State Department of Health and the Federal Bureau of Investigation held a joint press conference on the steps of Valley Memorial Hospital. Dr. Barlow was led out of the side entrance in handcuffs, a blue blazer draped over his wrists to hide the irons from the dozens of news cameras flashing in his face. The hospital's chief executive announced the immediate suspension of all hematology research grants and the complete sealing of the private wing. Upstairs, on the VIP 4th floor, the police were serving an evidentiary seizure warrant on room 412. I walked down the quiet, carpeted corridor behind Detective Morales. The door to Susanna's suite was open. Inside, the luxury was sickening. It didn't look like a hospital room. It looked like a 5-star hotel suite with fresh white hydrangeas, an Italian leather sofa, and an espresso bar. Susanna was sitting on the edge of the bed, no longer wearing the oversized, pitiful hospital gown. She wore a tailored cashmere sweater, her laptop open on her knees, screaming into a rose gold iPhone. Daddy, fix this. You said you had the judge in your pocket. Why are the feds in the lobby? I need that transplant by next Friday, or my blast count will spike. She looked up as Morales and I stepped into the room. Her phone slipped from her fingers, bouncing onto the plush rug. Naomi. Susanna's voice instantly dropped into that sweet, breathy, dying swan whisper. Tears pooled in her eyes with mechanical speed. Naomi, please. You have to understand. My dad, Tony, they did all of this without my knowledge. I was just a sick girl who wanted to live. You can't blame me for what the men around me did. I walked over to the foot of her bed. I picked up the iPad resting on her bedside table. The screen was still unlocked, displaying her private iMessage thread with Tony Henderson from 3 days ago. I turned the screen toward her and read the messages aloud. Susanna, Tuesday, 8:14 p.m. Tony, the Miller girls' HLA results came back October 10th. Barlow says her marrow cellularity is perfect. Get her signed up before she leaves for Thanksgiving break. Tony, Tuesday, 8:16 p.m. She's anemic. Barlow says the extraction might trigger acute hypovolemia or secondary infection if we take the full volume you need. Susanna, Tuesday, 8:19 p.m. I don't care. Give Barlow another 50 grand to pad her post-op vitals. She's a scholarship kid from a trailer park in Ohio. Tony, if she gets sick, she'll just drop out and go home. Nobody will look into it. Just get it inside me. Susanna's face turned an ugly, mottled gray. The sweet, fragile expression evaporated, replaced by a sneer of pure, aristocratic entitlement. So what? She spat, her voice dropping into a harsh, rasping venom that sounded nothing like the campus darling. You're a nobody, Naomi. Your entire family makes less in a year than my father pays in property taxes on our ski lodge. Your blood, your marrow, it was the only thing you had that was actually worth something. You should have been honored that your filthy cells were going to keep me alive. Detective Morales stepped forward, pulling a legal document from his pocket. Susanna Hastings, Morales said. You are being formally charged as a co-conspirator in federal procurement fraud, unauthorized medical exploitation, and criminal solicitation. Due to your medical status, you will remain under armed guard at the State Correctional Medical Facility in Lansing pending your arraignment. Susanna's eyes bulged. Lansing? That's a prison ward. Daddy, Daddy. 2 female officers stepped into the room, their boots heavy on the carpet. They didn't offer her a wheelchair. They took her by the elbows, unhooked her for line, and pulled her off the bed. As she was dragged past me, thrashing and screaming curses that would make a sailor blush, I leaned in close to her ear. In my last life, Susanna, I whispered, I died in an isolation ward while you gave a speech at the spring commencement about the beauty of second chances. Susanna froze, staring at me with a look of sheer, superstitious terror. This time, I said softly, you get to live through every single second of your trial. The trial of the Hastings medical ring lasted for grueling months, dominating national headlines from November through March. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering. Under federal cross-examination, Tony Henderson cracked on the third day. Facing 25 years for federal human trafficking and wire fraud, he took a plea deal and turned state's evidence against the entire Hastings family. He sat on the witness stand in an orange jumpsuit, his hands chained to his waist, weeping as he described how Arthur Hastings had systematically used the university's volunteer infrastructure to run an illegal, private HLA screening farm for ultra-wealthy private clients across the eastern seaboard. Dr. Barlow pled guilty to 11 counts of falsifying medical records, unlawful harvest solicitation, and felony medical malpractice. His medical license was revoked with prejudice, and he was sentenced to 18 years in a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania. Arthur Hastings fought the charges with an army of 70 corporate litigators, but the digital paper trail was unassailable. The forensic data recovered from his Zurich servers proved he had spent $4.2 million orchestrating the black market matching program. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all 46 counts. The Hastings family assets were frozen under federal RICO statutes. The multi-million-dollar estate in North Harbor was seized and auctioned by the U.S. Marshals, with 80% of the proceeds placed into an independent restorative fund for the 34 female students whose genetic data had been illegally harvested. Susanna Hastings never made it to a commencement stage. While awaiting sentencing at the Lansing Correctional Medical Facility, her leukemia relapsed into blast phase, because her name was now synonymous with the most infamous bioethics scandal in modern American history. Every private donor network on the International Registry subjected her file to rigorous ethical scrutiny. When a legitimate donor match was finally located in Germany 3 months later, the German Ethical Review Board discovered that the Hastings family had attempted to offer the donor an illegal under-the-table payment of €500,000 to expedite the flight. In accordance with international registry bylaws, the donor match was immediately cancelled due to commercial contamination. Susanna spent her final days not in a penthouse suite surrounded by white flowers and fawning sorority sisters, but in a secure linoleum-floored prison hospital room, guarded by 2 board corrections officers who didn't care about her grades, her beauty, or her father's lost empire. She died on a rainy Tuesday morning in April, alone, bankrupt, and wearing a standard-issue green hospital gown with a state identification number stamped across the collar. 1 year later, the spring air at Coastal State University was crisp and sweet, carrying the scent of blooming apple blossoms from the campus orchard. I sat on the wooden bench outside the newly dedicated Bioethics and Student Rights Institute in the center of the quad. The old Student Volunteer Coalition had been permanently dissolved by the Board of Trustees. In its place stood an entirely transparent, student-governed medical advocacy board, run under strict independent federal oversight. My anemia was finally under control. With proper iron infusions, regular sleep, and the complete removal of the toxic parasite that had posed as my boyfriend, my hemoglobin had stabilized at a healthy 13.5. My cheeks had color, my hands no longer shook when I opened my textbooks. Dean Collins walked down the brick path, holding 2 coffees and a thick envelope bearing the seal of the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. It arrived by courier this morning, Dean Collins said, sitting down beside me. With a wide, radiant smile. Full scholarship. Dual MD Masters in Bioethics. I looked down at the heavy ivory paper. In my past life, my application to medical school had been rejected because my transcript was marked with an incomplete, deceased stamp after my kidneys failed in the ICU. I ran my thumb over the embossed gold lettering of my name. Naomi Miller. You saved a lot of lives, Naomi, Dean Collins said softly, looking out at the hundreds of students crossing the sunlit quad, laughing, talking, and carrying their books without fear. Not just the 34 girls on that list. You broke a machine that had been running in the dark for a decade. I didn't do it to be a hero, I replied, opening the envelope and sliding the acceptance letter into the sunlight. Then why did you do it? I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling the steady, rhythmic, unbroken thud of my own heart beating inside my chest, strong, warm, and entirely my own. Because my life belongs to me, I said. And nobody gets to steal it twice.